If you're a regular viewer to AutoEV, and if you're not, why not, then you'll know that we feature quite a lot of large sort of SUVs, and with good reason. A third of all new car sales in the UK today are an SUV of one shape or another, and it's thought to be by 2023 they're going to account for 50 million units globally. But what if your aspirations are slightly smaller? What if an SUV isn't really for you and what you really need is a small, fun electric runaround? Well, that's what we're going to hopefully show you today by getting three of our favourites together. Now, we've had all three on the channel before: the Mini Electric, the Fiat 500e and the Honda E. But what we wanted to do today was to get them all together and give you the definitive answer of which is the best small EV for your money. So, without further ado, welcome to Oxfordshire, welcome to the Mini Electric, welcome to the Fiat 500, welcome to the Honda E, and welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we get on to this week's triple test of the Mini, the Honda E and the new Fiat 500 Electric, it is of course that time of the video where I ask you to like it and subscribe to the channel, and please press the little bell button down below so you receive notification of when our next videos go live. And please do remember, send us your comments because we do like them. Now, where are we? Well, we've come to the wonderful Caffeine Machine in Oxfordshire for their first Eclectic Electric Weekend in conjunction with Michelin tyres. Just so that we can get a proper road trip and give you a definitive view on what we love in terms of these three cars. So in terms of the cars, what do we have? Well, we're familiar with the Mini Electric, but it's now had a big midlife update for 2021, and this is the electric collection that we have with us here in this specification. And Fiat, they've given us the new Fiat 500 Electric, a modern interpretation of what they think a Fiat 500 should look like. And how could we forget the beautiful Honda E, one of our absolute favourite small EVs? But can it stand against these two cars which we know and love? Time to find out. So let's start with the Mini, because it's the most probably familiar to us, certainly on this channel, because if you remember, we ran one for 5 months as a long-term test car. But what have they changed? Well, actually not a huge amount. What they've done is they've taken away the fog lights from the front and they've now got these cooling ducts at the side. The big sort of bulbous grille that there once was, that infill of plastic, is now body coloured, and as I say, this particular car is the collection, and it's a little bit of a limited edition with certainly nice things about it. It's got the gradiated coloured roof, it's got the black pack round it, but as I say, styling wise, it's just round about the front where the changes have taken place. It's still the Mini that we know and love, but look, I really like this car, but I do feel in terms of its styling, it's trying a little bit too hard to invoke memories of Minis of yore. I don't think it's quite as pure and as good a modern interpretation of the original Mini that Frank Stephenson's design was when they first relaunched it back in 2001. I'd say of the three, it's probably the one that's trying just a little bit too hard. Because if you ask me, this is retro done right. Fiat have done a proper modern interpretation of the classic 500, but it doesn't look as cute as the last one did. They've changed it to make it look a little bit more purposeful. You've now got these DRLs cut into the bonnet with these slightly kind of frowning eyes here, these lovely kind of daytime running lights there, and the big 500 logo emblazoned on there like a real badge of honour. I mean, the silhouette is exactly as you remember a Fiat 500 to be, but it's modern, and it's not based on the last generation car at all. It is a completely new car from the ground up. Its dimensions are bigger in every way. It's slightly longer, it's slightly wider, and it's slightly taller than the last car. But if you want to know what I think a modern electric super mini should look like, look no further. Honda have just done an amazing job on this car. It's not retro at all, it's very contemporary. There's a slight nod to the original Civic and the belt line and the window line along the side, but generally this is a proper ground up EV, and it's been designed to look like one. I think this is going to go down as one of those cars like the Jaguar I-Pace and the BMW i3, a real standout EV for the future. So there we are. In terms of styling, we're putting the Honda first, Fiat 500 second, and Mini third. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below. So in terms of practicality, what wins the test? Well, three small cars, three fairly small boots, but actually quite a big difference. The Honda, despite being a ground-up EV, has by far the smallest boot, with no underfloor storage for cables. You're stuck with these bags. That's 171 litres. With the cables bags in place, can we get 2 travel suitcases in? Well, let's find out. It's 2 small cabin bags. No, they can't. They've got to be taken out and left behind. But what about the Fiat? Well, that is slightly bigger at 185 litres. But again, despite being a new platform and ground-up EV, there's no cable storage. You get this rather natty fashion bag to keep your cables in. But do the suitcases fit? Yes, we can get the 2 travel suitcases in the Fiat, and there is room to spare. But of course, it's the Mini that takes the prize here, despite being the car that's a converted internal combustion car, because not only does it have cable storage underneath the boot floor, but it's also got a 211 litre boot. Victory to the Mini then. So in terms of rear seat space, the Mini and the Fiat are 3-door only. On the continent, you can have the Fiat with what they call a 3+1 configuration, a bit like the old Mini Clubman with a rear hinged rear door, but because it's only on the left-hand drive cars, they're not going to bring it to the UK. So you are limited in terms of rear seat space in the Mini and the Fiat. Although in saying that, it's okay for children. As I say, we ran one for 5 months last year, the Mini, and it was great for my little girl. She was fine in the back of it. There's enough space to get your child seats in. There's ISOFIX points in the back as well. But adults, yeah, you're not going to be well catered for on the back of either the Mini or the Fiat. So despite having the smallest boot, it does claw back some practicality by having the rear doors at the back. And actually, there is reasonable room in here. I mean, the seat's set up for a slightly taller driver than me, but I've still got foot room, I've still got knee room, and plenty of headroom. And of course, there's ample bits of storage space. We've got pockets in the back here, we've got a little bit of storage there and some charging ports down there. So yeah, so it does claw back a little bit of an advantage over the other two by having the extra rear doors. And bringing up the rear is the 500. It's without doubt the tightest of the 3 in the back here. As I say, there's plenty of room in terms of children, and there's ISOFIX points obviously on the rear seats, but there's also one in the front passenger seat, which does give it a little bit of an advantage. But in terms of actual rear space, it's the loser in this category. The interior of the Mini is familiar, and of course, as we keep saying, we lived with one last year, but it is now starting to look a little bit dated, even despite this 2021 upgrade. The now central infotainment screen is slightly large, 8 inches, and it's touchscreen, and there's some little changes around it, such as the piano black on the steering wheel and some new controls on the spokes. But on the whole, it is the Mini that we're familiar with. Now, interestingly, as much as we think this car has probably the most premium feel to it, and certainly in terms of the seats, certainly the most supportive seats for a driver's car, it is the interior that slightly disappoints in some ways, beginning to look a little bit overworked. It's like exterior, it's little trying the retro too hard. Of course, the Honda dazzled us with its 5-screen dashboard and virtual door mirrors, which, as I've mentioned, aren't much better than Audi's virtual mirrors. It is a big draw with the Honda, all this tech, and you might find it overwhelming at first, but actually you soon do get used to it. But it's not just the tech that's on offer that make this one of the most successful interiors. It's like the BMW i3 in a lot of ways. It gives you that feeling of space. It's a genuinely lovely place to spend time in. The seats are very comfortable, everything's laid out well, and of course, traditional Honda build quality. Now, for a better, more decisive and conclusive review of all 3 interiors, we'll put links up to each individual car's road test that we've done previously, where if you go to the interior section, you'll get a much more comprehensive review of all the interior features. And much like the Mini, the Fiat follows a very sort of retro theme with its very simplistic dashboard, very reminiscent of the original cars, but brought up to date in a really modern and actually quite luxurious way. It doesn't want for much equipment, system. You've got wireless charging, you've got the big infotainment screen, touch screen, that tried there to be mirroring, if you'll pardon the pun, the exact mirror position of the 1950s classic. This elegant two-spoke leather steering wheel, which looks like the old classic as well, and depending obviously on your trim level, whether or not you get the cloth covered dashboard or the body coloured one. But on the whole interior, despite being quite open and looking quite basic, actually feels quite luxurious. Also worthy of a mention is the seat material. Again, we'll put a link up to the original 500 road test that we did on the new car, but it's made from recycled material. Fiat are very, very keen to promote the sustainability, and this is a real nod to that. In terms of interiors then, what gets our vote? Well, the Honda definitely blinds you with the screens and the tech, and the Fiat is that simplistic luxury. But Charlie, my colleague, feels that it's the Mini that gives the most premium quality, despite the design looking a little bit aged now. So let's just call it a draw, shall we? So in terms of battery capacities, what are we looking at? Well, the Mini and the Honda are quite similar, with a 33 kilowatt hour battery in the Mini and a 35.5 kilowatt hour battery in the Honda, giving 127 and 145 miles WLTP respectively. But it's the Fiat that gives us a larger battery capacity at 44 kilowatt hours and an official WLTP range of up to 199 miles. Now with the Fiat, you can also get a smaller battery car that has a lower power output, but that only comes in action trim. But it's also the same with the Honda. You can move down in power for a cheaper price, whereas with the Mini, that's all the choice you have. Now all cars will take reasonably fast charging speeds. The Fiat will do 85 kilowatts, whereas the other two are up to 50 kilowatts. But all three cars will go relatively from 10 to 80% in just over 30 minutes and take a full charge from your 7 kilowatt home wall box overnight, or just a few hours. Now it's fair to say that our little road trip today through the countryside is probably not the Fiat's, shall we say, a natural hunting ground. I mean, it is primarily designed to be that sort of more kind of urban runaround. It certainly doesn't have the dynamics of the Mini. But in saying that, it's not embarrassing itself at all. You know, it's 117 brake horsepower that you get when the motor that comes with the bigger battery car, the 44 kilowatt hour battery. And it's ample. It's absolutely ample. The car doesn't feel heavy. The steering is very light, and of course that's because it's obviously geared for the kind of city streets, the urban runaround, as we've said. So the steering is a lot light. It doesn't have the feel and the communication of the Mini. But as I say, don't think that it can't cope with being out on these kind of more sort of rural sort of like roads as such, and it keeps a good ton of speed about the car. The brakes are nice too, and depending obviously on what mode you have it in will depend obviously on how the brakes actually work. So for instance, I have the car in range at the moment, which is effectively making it most of the brake regeneration. So it's not really sort of like adjustable brake regeneration that you can have in certain other cars where you can have very aggressive or not aggressive at all. When it's in range, you can really feel it when you start to release the throttle. It starts to brake, and it'll bring the car up to a complete stop, and then hold it there for you as well, which is it's quite handy certainly in these kind of sort of, like I say, environments. So it really is that one pedal driving. The two other modes that you got are down here. You can activate them down here. This little rocker switch. So if I bring it back, we've got normal mode, which switches off that brake regeneration and allow the car to coast. So for instance, let's say on maybe a motorway where you want more of you don't want to use that braking all the time, because then obviously you're having to use power again to get back up. So in normal mode, speed bump, in normal mode the car will just coast, and then that allows you to use obviously accelerator to go, brake pedal to stop. The third mode that you have is Sherpa, and I've spoken about Sherpa before on the road test of the 500 that we did, and that is that sort of like the Sherpas in the Himalayas, designed to sort of like put a loving arm around you and just get you home. It'll eke out every last little bit of battery power, so you can get the maximum amount of range out of it. But in all honesty, normal mode has been fine, and range is quite nice because, as I say, I quite like getting that little bit of engine braking when you're around here. Sorry, brake regeneration when you're around here. Now the suspension is again good. It's perfectly acceptable in terms of the how the car behaves. Urban streets, potholes at the speed bumps that we've just gone over, it doesn't lop over them, and it's a big improvement on the old petrol 500. It doesn't feel quite as crashy, and potholes are dealt with really, really well. Remember, this is a completely new chassis. This does not share anything with the previous generation 500. It is completely new from the ground up, and it really is noticeable. I mean, as I say, I've had a couple of the old generation 500s as a twin air and in a bath, and you know, they're not the most comfortable of cars to drive around in. This feels better, and you've also got reasonable comfort in the seats. Now let's talk a little bit about the interior when I'm stationary at these traffic lights, because as I've said before, it's this sort of like simplistic luxury that I think really, really works. The infotainment screens and the nice easy view, because it reminds me of the old mirror from the old 1950s car, and that's what it's designed to be on, sort of dashboard mounted. You still get a good view out. I mean, it's some cars that have got really high mounted screens, the gap between the top of the screen and the mirror can really impede your view, but actually in this it's fine. So okay, it doesn't have the big spread of screens across like the Honda E, but everything's here and everything's nice and easy to see and nice and easy to read. We've got physical heating and ventilation controls, and as I say, the car just it has a usability that I really, really like. As I say, we're out, you know, on open country roads, 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, and it's lovely. What is very surprising as well, and again going back to that sort of feeling of luxury, is its refinement. There's not a lot of wind noise, even with this big panoramic roof, and obviously there's a blind that you can pull across on that. But the car feels comfortable to drive. You know, we came up here this morning, and I came down, met the lads out, I came down the M4, and then we've been up the A34, you know, sitting at a steady 70 miles an hour on motorway and dual carriageways. It is absolutely perfect for that. I really like this car. I think Fiat have done an incredible job on the new 500. I really do. And they need to be applauded for it, because it feels like a new generation. It feels, if they hadn't done the car in 2007, the second generation 500, if they'd just said, right, we're going to reinvent the Fiat 500 like the old original car, but in 2021, this is what they'd have built. It is just perfect interpretation of modern Fiat 500, and I like that. This works for me. This really works for me. Oh look, there's the Honda. Rod's going to be eating into his battery as we speak here, whereas I've got plenty in my little Fiat with its lovely big 44 kilowatt hour battery. I think he'll be quite so smug when we stop later for a charge. This is a wonderful film shoot that we're on today with the other two boys. We don't normally do this all together, it's normally just me, but we've come out for a bit of a mate's road trip today in all three cars, and we've just swapped over for the first time, and those two are trying to figure out how each other's cars work. Now the Honda splits the other two, both in terms of the way it feels and power. So we've got the 150 brake horsepower advanced model, but like the Fiat, there is a lower powered model available with 136 brake horsepower. But as I say, it's the advanced model we have, 150 brake horsepower, and as I say, it's smack bang between the Fiat's power and the Mini's power, and that's pretty much how the Honda also feels to drive. Somewhere between the two, you've got the sort of urban, you know, sort of like maneuverability of the Fiat, but it's not embarrassing when it comes to dynamics. Okay, again, it's not as sharp and pin sharp as the Mini, but it certainly is a reasonably fun car to punt down a road. The steering feels nice. It's not quite as light as the Fiat, even though the car has a ridiculously tight turning circle. The car still has a sort of a slickness, if you like, to the Fiat's lightness. Hondas have always had this sort of like real oily, I don't know, just a real quality engineering feel to them, and the E feels exactly like that. Every time you turn the wheel, the steering wheel, the wheels respond. It just feels absolutely right. You get a good driving position. I mean, visibility is excellent as well. Obviously, there's a lot of glass around you. It's the only 5-door of the 3 as well, so the rear windows are quite big. And, you know, obviously we've talked about the dashboard in the car as well, but everything's clear and laid out well in front of you. The mirrors work really, really well. I mean, you couldn't get a bigger contrast to the Audi's virtual mirrors, because, you know, they're in the wrong place, they're way down in the doors, whereas the Hondas are exactly where you expect to find a mirror, just in that corner where a quarter light would be. If you're too young to remember what quarter lights were, ask your dad or Google, although I'm sure other search engines are available as well. But back to the car. How does it feel? Well, the suspension's nice too. It's a little bit more compliant. I'd probably say there's a bit more road roar from the tyres than you get in the Fiat. The Fiat feels a bit quieter. You know, I've just jumped literally from the 500 straight into the E, and I have to say there's a little bit more noise coming through. It's not quite, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not deafening, but you don't feel it being quite as quiet as you do in the Fiat. The Fiat's done really, really well. Fiat have done really, really well with that car to make it feel a very refined small car. And as I said, it's completely different to the previous generation car as how it feels inside. It doesn't feel as, I don't want to say cheap, because the other car felt really good and I really liked mine, but you know what I mean, it just doesn't feel as basic as the other car. It feels luxurious, it feels the money's worth. And the Honda does too, but as I say, there's just a little bit more noise from it. But the rest of the Honda is still an absolute winner for me. I mean, it is just beautifully laid out in here. Everything's to hand, you know, you just got a nice slickness to the controls. I love the dashboard, but more than just the screens, I love the way it's all laid out. There's a nice feeling of space in here. It's sort of open cockpit design, very similar to the Fiat. You've got this little centre console area down here where we've got the drive, the transmission buttons, if you like, park, reverse, neutral and drive. I can adjust the drive modes from down here. The brake regeneration is done via the paddles on the steering wheel, and we can increase that via the left paddle or decrease it via the right one. And that's nice because it's just easy enough to adjust. As I say, the drive modes are down here. We've got sport, where you can feel it's got a bit of pickup. You know, as I say, it's not as grippy and go as the Mini is, but it's got a reasonable pickup. It certainly feels a little bit more enthusiastic than the 500 does. We drop it back to normal mode, which is pretty much where everyone would have it. And again, you know, there's a nice response from the throttle. The pedal's got a nice weight behind it. The brakes have got a nice feel from the pedal as well. So everything feels, everything feels good, and everything feels like it's been designed to be like this. It hasn't been converted from something else to accept an electric drivetrain. And that's where the Fiat and the Honda really do win here. They do feel like proper EVs. Now the Mini, which we'll get on to, as it's the dynamic one of the three. It is the hot hatch, as we've said before, but still there are compromises to be made with it. Not as many as you might think, but it still has the odd compromise in it. But the Honda just feels, wow, it just feels lovely. It really, really does. It never fails to make me smile when I drive this car, or even just when I see one. I think it's a real triumph, and Honda deserve a real pat on the back with this car, because I just think it is lovely. It really is lovely. Now, as I said, handling wise, the steering's got that slickness to it that I really like, and out on the sort of like the open kind of country roads, it's got a nice small car feel to it. Not the hot hatch that the Mini is, I keep saying that, but that's exactly how it is. It's just, but it doesn't disgrace itself at all. And again, this lovely round elegant 2-spoke steering wheel like the Fiat. It's got a nice, you know, it's got a nice feel to it. I've got a lovely driving position, everything's clear and concise. I really like this car. This is going to be a tough day today. This is going to be a tough choice, deciding between these 3 cars. But we will have a winner at the end. Of that I am sure. It's a service we provide. Now, of the 3 cars, it is the Mini without doubt that is the most dynamic. This is its whole reason for being. We keep saying this, it's the sort of like the first electric hot hatch, and that's exactly how it feels, and that's exactly how it drives. It's 184 brake horsepower and scampering through those front wheels onto the tarmac, and it really does feel like it. It's a proper little driver's car. The steering, it's just got this lovely response to it. The slug of torque that you get through, but it never seems to overwhelm the chassis at all. The chassis feels like it could actually cope with a lot more, and maybe that's one of the benefits of coming from an internal combustion engine car chassis, because obviously with the petrol engined Minis, there's the John Cooper Works, which has a lot more power than this car. So it copes admirably well, and as I say, it is the driver's car of the 3. The seats hold you well, you've got a really lovely driving position. The steering wheel, it's a nice fat, thick rimmed wheel, you know, with Napa leather on it now. The controls have been slightly redesigned for the 21 model year car as well. But the foot pedal controls, you know, when you press the throttle, it's just this immediate response. When you press on the brake, you get a nice feel from the brake pedal as well. I'd say the ride is the sort of the firmest of the 3, but not in any way uncomfortable. In fact, in some ways, it deals a little bit better with some of the bumps than the Honda does. The Honda sometimes just feels a little bit jittery over some, a little bit pattery, which I must admit I never noticed before. But it's certainly the Mini is certainly the stiffest of the 3 when it comes to sort of like ride quality. But the trade-off is there's no body roll, there's none at all. You pitch it into a bend, you dig in, and the car just grips and it goes. It is a really sensational little car to drive this, and all 3 of us have said there just doesn't seem a lot of point in buying the petrol engine Cooper S now when this car's available, because its power delivery is so good. Now, you've got different driving modes like you do with all the other 2 cars, and they're down here. You've got green plus, that's the ones that really eke out that sort of like last bit of mile for you, a little bit like Sherpa mode in the Fiat. And obviously when you're in those modes, it sort of like dulls everything down, because obviously you're not trying to stick the throttle down, so you need a much firmer push, and it's reeling back on a few things as well. You go up into mid, which is the sort of normal setting, where everything feels, well, normal I suppose, and everything just works well, and you know, there's no issues. You flick it up one more into sport, and whoa, it absolutely just, the throttle's much sharper, and you can really feel the car come alive. It is a sensational little car to drive, there's no doubt about it. It's of the 3, as I say, it is the driver's car of choice. But that's not necessarily what we're here today to find out. We're not necessarily just going to base it on what's the fastest, which is the quickest. Because if we were, then obviously it's the Mini that would win. It has to work as an overall package. So therefore, in terms of performance and handling, it is the Mini that takes the prize here, if it's out and out performance you're after. It's a good car, this. I really like it. This is a tough test, but we're doing it all for you. Never let that be said that we wouldn't. So price-wise, all three of the cars that we have here are towards the upper end of the respective ranges. The Mini that we have, as I say, is the collection model, which comes in at just over £32,000, but the range does start from £26,000. The Honda that we have is around £31,000 for its advanced model, like the test car we have, but again it starts with a range of about £28,000. But it's the Fiat that gives the broader range of choice, because the range itself starts from £23,000 if you go for the base action model with the smaller battery, and all the way up to £28,000 for the car that we have here. Also remember, you can have the Fiat as a convertible. Victory's the Fiat then. Now, in terms of competition, these three are so evenly matched, which is why we've chosen them today. But there are other cars that you could consider, such as the Peugeot E28 and Renault Zoe and Vauxhall Corsa E. But with those cars, we feel you're kind of trading off the style and the image for a bit more practicality and a bit more volume-orientated manufacturers. But in terms of the style of these cars, if you wanted something a little bit different, what is there? Well, there's Mazda's excellent MX-30. It's sort of small crossover style with its weird little coach doors. And of course, aping that is BMW's very own i3, which the Mini shares a lot of its electric componentry from. And that's still one of our favourite cars of all, never mind EVs, it's one of our actual favourite cars. Bear in mind what's coming in the future, however, with Volkswagen Group expanding its ID range, and they have shown the concept at the recent Munich Motor Show, which previews a smaller car that will slot in below the ID3. And whilst they are now pretty much out of production, you do maybe have to consider smaller cars such as the Seat Mii, Skoda Citigo e-iV and Volkswagen e-Up. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the Mini Electric. We like its chassis dynamics, its performance, it's well equipped, and its build quality. We don't like its limited range, tight rear seat space, and the styling inside and out is not as interesting as its rivals. And here's what we like and what we don't like about the Honda E. We like its design, its tech, it's well equipped, and its build quality. We don't like its limited range and its small boot. And here's what we like and what we don't like about the Fiat 500. We like its styling, the dashboard design, its range, the charging capabilities, the convertible option, and its value for money. We don't like it's smaller on the inside than both of its main rivals. It's light steering, and the performance is way down on the Honda and the Mini. So we've driven all three cars, we've examined them thoroughly, not just in individual road tests, but again on our lads' road trip to Caffeine Machine. So what do we think? Well, the Mini is by far gets our vote as the best driver's car of the three. It is an absolute sensation. In fact, all three of us agree, why would you buy a petrol Cooper S when that car is available? It's just grips and goes, and you've got that instantaneous slug of power. But it is compromised because obviously it is a combustion engine car that has now been retrospectively re-engineered to be an electric car, whereas the Fiat and the Honda are new bespoke ground up EVs. So it's a narrow third place to the Mini. But between the Fiat and the Honda, well, we're all in agreement that it's the Honda that takes the prize for us. It is still the best small EV out there. Rod, my colleague, put it just such a succinct way where he said the Mini and the Fiat are design classics, but it's the Honda that feels like it's going to be the new design classic for the future. Thank you for watching AutoEV. As always, please do remember to like and subscribe to the channel, pressing the little bell button down below to receive notification of when our next video goes live. And if you haven't been there, can you please head over to autoev.co.uk, where you'll see a back catalogue of our road test libraries just waiting for your viewing pleasure. Thanks to Caffeine Machine and Michelin for hosting us today, and thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.